I don't think there's ever been a family with more skeletons in their closet and horrific dark secrets than the Murdaugh family. If you live in South Carolina and this was 5 years ago, you'd probably hear the name Alec Murdaugh and think of a powerful, well-respected attorney. But in reality, this man was straight diabolical. Not only did he steal millions of dollars from his law firm and clients, he then proceeded to secretly murder his own wife and son in a desperate attempt to gain sympathy and delay the investigation into what he was doing behind closed doors. This all played out in a way that made him the victim. He said that he just so happened to discover his wife and son killed, and at first people believed him. But the mystery would only deepen when just a few months later, Alec himself would be found shot in the head on the side of the road. He did survive this, and most would think that he was attacked too, just like his family. But it would later be proven that he tried to stage his own murder so that his surviving son could collect on a $10 million insurance payout. This is one of the most disturbing yet confusing cases I have ever read about, and the layers go so deep with this family that include a string of suspicious deaths all tied to them. If you want to learn about this case from the very beginning, then you should read this book. It's called Tangled Vines, Power, Privilege, and the Murdaugh Family Murders by John Glatt. He reconstructs the rise of the Murdaugh family and the double murder that would rock the community. If this case is confusing to you, but you still want to learn everything about it, I'd suggest starting here for a clear breakdown.
I have another creepy story about Epping Forest. A couple have DM'd me and they said they took their dogs out walking to Epping Forest. One of them was just a puppy at the time. The guy tells his girlfriend, whatever you do, don't take him off the lead. I don't think he's quite ready to be let wild in this sort of place. It's just too big. If he went missing, we'd never find him. But as they're getting out of the car and she lets the big dog out, the small dog, the puppy, gets overexcited and jumps out, but he doesn't have his lead on him yet. And so she starts to scream and she starts chasing her dog into the forest. Puppy is chasing the big dog and she is just there running, kind of whacking bushes out of her way as she goes. Boyfriend is right behind her and he's giggling and she's thinking, okay, good, I'm glad he finds this funny because I really thought he was going to have a go at me. And the entire time she's saying, can you see them? And she's running, she's panicking, but she's giggling as well because if he finds it funny, she finds it funny too. And then eventually both the dogs get to this big clearing. She grabs both of them, she puts them both on their leash and she waits for a little bit in this clearing. She can't see her boyfriend anywhere, but he had just been right behind her. And in the panic of chasing both dogs, she hasn't even brought her phone. So she just stands there, panicking, looking around, suddenly realising that she is all by herself in the vast forest. So she tries to work out the path that she's just been down and she starts pushing the bushes out of the way. And on the floor, she finds an Apple Watch. Eventually, she finds her way back to the car and she says to her boyfriend, where the hell did you go? He says, I never left the car because that was all your fault. I told you have the dogs on there, so I wanted to let you sort that out. And she can't believe it. She's like, I heard somebody behind me. I heard them giggling. And she shows her boyfriend the Apple Watch and they decide that they'll go and drop it to the police station. And a few days later, the police call her and they say, can you take us to the exact spot where you found this watch? And she takes them there and the police start an investigation. That is all I'm going to say on that.
Let's talk about something spooky. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff, and today I'm going to be talking about kind of a follow-up to the whole mimic thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, one of my very first viral videos was about a mimic spirit that sounded like my boyfriend, and I have only heard it once. My boyfriend's dad only heard it once. The dog only heard it once from my knowledge, and his sister only heard it once, and that was it. So we haven't heard it in a long time. However, I do have a question. I'm not completely sure if mimic spirits can manifest themselves into different people or if it's just one voice, so maybe someone can clue me in. But my mom found out about my TikTok pretty recently, and she saw my mimic story because her coworker is actually a follower, and the way she asked me if the mimic can sound like me, and I said yes. Why do you ask that? My blood ran cold when she said, because I've been hearing your voice. Just for some context, I went on a camping trip 3 weeks ago with my boyfriend and his friends, and I didn't bother waking up my mom when I left because it was 10 a.m. I don't bother my mom when she's sleeping, but she says when she woke up from her nap, she was just in her room and she heard me go, Mom. She didn't respond the first time, and then I said it again, Mom. And just to clarify, I do leave my door open, so when she walked out of the room, and that's how you know I'm not home, is if my door is open. She walked to my room and my bed is empty, fully made, and she tried texting me and I didn't have service at the time, so when we were driving back into town, I got all these texts saying, when did you guys leave? Like, what time did you guys leave? And when I got home and I told her, face drained with color, and I didn't know why until she found my TikTok. But I don't know. That's gonna do it for me though. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Spooky story time. A follower named Penelope sent me the story, and we're gonna call it My Wendigo Encounter. A Wendigo is very similar to a skinwalker, and they often mimic humans. They talk like them, they cry like them, and they even moan like them. It is said that they often try to attract you to possibly eat you. Penelope says that the night before Halloween, her and her friend decided to sneak out, and they bike rode to their neighborhood park because they were going to... I had done this many times before, so they went to the specific corner because they know that there are no cameras. The thing is that about 30 feet in front of them is like this eerie, woodsy area. She says that in their past times, they would often hear noises and often see deer looking at them and stuff like that. But for some reason, this specific time, it felt different. Kind of like heavy. And she says that as soon as she sat down, she just had this gut feeling that something was going to happen. So they started to do what they were doing, and her friend tells her, I have this off feeling for some reason. And Penelope's like, bitch, same. I didn't want to tell you because I don't want to creep you out. Seconds later, they hear rustling coming from the woods. So Penelope's friend pulls out her phone, turns on the flashlight, and points it in the direction that this rustling is happening, and they gasp in horror. There they see a deer with its broken, it's bloody, and there's even like skin hanging off of it. It was standing right outside of the woodsy area, so when the deer saw that they saw it, it kind of runs into the woods, and then they start hearing running coming from every single direction. They're pointing their flashlights, looking around, but they don't see anything. Immediately, Penelope's like, all right, we need to get the hell out of here. So they get on their bikes and they are paddling as fast as they possibly can. Then they hear something screaming, almost human, but not quite. And she says that they're literally pedaling for their lives. Like, they are hauling ass home, and the whole time they can hear something chasing them the whole ride home. And she says that they were riding really fast, so whatever this was that was running behind them was not human. It was too fast to be human. And as soon as they get home, it stops. Penelope says that she never went back. Obviously she's traumatized, and she even stopped sneaking out because of how scared she was. Makes sense. What do you guys think this was? Thank you so much to Penelope for sending me the story. If you guys have any other spooky stories that you'd like for me to share, please send them via DM or email, and I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye! Spooky story time. A follower named Vincent sent me this story, and we're going to call it My Grandma Regina. This is going to be a 2-part series, so stay tuned. Vincent says that in 1989, he was about 6 years old, and he lived in a home with his mom, his 5 siblings, his grandma Regina, and his dad was kind of in and out due to alcoholism, so he wasn't really around too much. Vincent is the youngest of the 5 siblings, so he was very close to his grandma, and his grandma did have to do dialysis, so he would walk her to the bus whenever she had her appointments, and when she was gone, he would sit in front of the bay window just waiting for her to come home. One particular day, she did not come home. He would ask his mom, like, hey, where's grandma? And his mom always came up with excuses, but because he was so young, he didn't fully understand. And days turned into weeks. He asked his mom, but she never wanted to tell him that she had passed because she didn't want to put him through the hurt. Vincent says that after her passing, they started noticing paranormal activity going on in the house. He says that it began very subtle, cabinets and drawers in the kitchen opening and closing, and then things started to get more odd. He says that at night, they could clearly hear someone walking around their house. They would go outside and check, and of course, there would be nobody there. And he says that as the days went on, things got more and more drastic. Vincent says that his grandma's cries could be heard throughout the house. And it wasn't like just, oh, I'm crying. It was like a suffering kind of cry and groan. One night, his mom was laying in her bed, relaxing, and she suddenly feels like someone lays right next to her in the bed. And then she suddenly gets paralyzed. She cannot move. At the same time, Vincent's sister heard something in her room, freaked her out so much that she started screaming her head off. Once mom heard that her daughter is screaming her head off, she's somehow able to snap out of this paralysis state, runs towards her daughter's room. Her daughter is running towards her in the hallway, and then suddenly his sister gets violently shoved sideways, kind of like towards the living room. They freak out. Mom is like, all right, we need to get out of here. Let's go look for your dad. They go to the bar, find dad, and he is not in his full mental state, of course. And he says, I will get home when I'm ready to get home. Y'all need to leave. They had nowhere else to go. They were still very shook. So they go back home, but they don't go inside the home. They're kind of like sitting in the bumper of the car, relaxing outside. And then they start to hear cries coming from inside the house. And then suddenly the front door opens and closes as if someone is coming outside. And then they can actually physically hear footsteps walking towards them. Obviously they're freaking out. They all jump into the car and they drive off. Go to part 2.
When his car was found in the middle of the night, his engine was still running and his headlights were on, and just a few meters away were all of his clothes. It was the 13th of December 2020 in Texas. Jason Landry was a 21-year-old student at Sam Houston State University. He was a really nice, happy young guy. He was always up for a laugh, not taking life too seriously. He was actually really excited because he was heading home to spend the Christmas holidays with his family and his old friends. But certain friends noticed he'd started acting kind of weird recently. He'd been smoking W, and one friend said that he had started chatting more about like aliens and conspiracies and things like that, but the friend didn't really know whether this was kind of in a serious way or whether this was just a high person chatting. On the evening in question, he did get in his car and he started heading back home. Now, this should have taken him roughly 2.5 hours. He'd popped his destination into the Waze app so that he could navigate back home. With him in the car, he had a bag of toiletries he had packed, like things he would need for his stay, including a PlayStation, laptop, and his 2 pet fish. Jason's phone documented the route that he took, and he was kind of in contact with people during his journey. He was making some calls. He was on FaceTime to his ex-girlfriend, and he was sending her several Snapchats. All seemed fine, and he seemed in good spirits. But when he reached Lulling at 11:24 p.m, he suddenly stopped using the Waze app. He then went the total opposite direction to the direction he should have been heading in. At 11:28 p.m, he sent his ex a chilled-looking selfie of him, and nobody would ever hear from him again. In the early hours of the morning, Jason's car was found abandoned with clear signs of a single car crash. The keys were still in the ignition and the lights were still on. And bizarrely, just meters away from the vehicle were a pile of Jason's clothes, even including shoes and underwear. His backpack was also found very close by, with sadly inside his pet fish who had passed away. When Jason's dad heard about the crash, he was horrified and he went over to the scene of the accident, but Jason's car had already just been towed away. No evidence had even been collected from the scene. They just sort of chalked this off as an accident. Jason's dad really was the one who had to push police and kind of be the driving force in this investigation. He was the one that found Jason's phone inside of the towed car. What he found from this phone was so unusual, it really made no sense. Phone records showed that after he sent that Snapchat to his ex, Jason's phone location just stopped. It stopped working. The information just abruptly stopped, and for over an hour the phone was just not picking up any location data. This was despite the phone still being on and still having signal. Now, police did organise a search operation, but despite their best efforts, despite even like tracker dogs being involved, there was no sign of the missing boy. Then, in 2022, 2 years after Jason's disappearance, a man with a striking resemblance to Jason came into the hospital. He had been found unconscious in New York, but just look how similar the two faces look. Sadly though, despite this giving the family some short-lived hope, this actually wasn't Jason. This was just somebody who just happened to be his doppelganger. To this day, we still have no answers as to what happened to Jason that night.
Let's talk about something scary. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff on here, and today I'm going to be talking about an experience that my best friend in high school had, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know how I forgot it. It's absolutely bone-chilling, and it really makes you think about how many places are actually haunted. So let's get into it. I had a friend in high school, we'll call him Jay, who was an active and avid ghost hunter. He believes in the paranormal, the afterlife, spirits, demons, stuff like that. And we really started being friends while I was going through the aftermath of playing with a Ouija board. So just for some context, 2 hours outside of my hometown, there is a road in the middle of nowhere called Seven Sisters Road. And it is allegedly very haunted. Legend has it that 7 women in the early 1900s were murdered on that road and their spirits never left. And as a result, people experience paranormal activity. People say that they see balls of light, apparitions, they have their radio go out, their car dies, they hear laughing and whispering and screaming. And just as a reminder, this is in the middle of nowhere and it is a gravel road with a forest, train tracks, and that's about it. And I guess my friend Jay got really curious one night and drove out there. And it is safe to say that I woke up from him blowing my phone up. And what I saw on my phone was absolutely horrifying. It was a vlog style video with one hand on the wheel, one hand on his phone, filming, talking to the camera about how he's about to park on Seven Sisters Road and how he's kind of skeptical because it's just a legend. He parks and immediately his radio goes out. And when that happens, you can visibly see that he was afraid. And he's like, there's no way. So he starts messing with the buttons because he's parked at this point. Radio comes back on and he's like, okay, it was just a fluke. As he says that, car dies. And I don't mean his car shuts off and his headlights are still on. I'm talking like car died, headlights are off. So now he's sitting in complete darkness in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. And it gets worse because he starts to hear gravel moving. And at this point, you can see the pure fear in his face. And he says that he can start to feel the car moving. Not forwards and backwards, but kind of rocking side to side. He sits there for a second. After it's done, he tries to start the car. Car starts. He turns the headlights on. He gets out and he starts looking at the car. At which point, you can see more fear in his face when he realizes that there are footprints on his car. And at this point, he turns his camera around and he's filming the footprints, and he takes his finger and swipes it across the footprint to show that these are fresh. And if anyone doesn't know why he did that, when you drive on a gravel road, you have a layer of dust on your car. I've talked about this particular thing before. You have a layer of dust that sits on your car, and when you touch it, it leaves a mark. And by him taking his finger and going across the footprint, leaving the same mark on the hood of the car as the footprint did, showed that those footprints were fresh. Then he said something along the lines of like, absolutely not. Gets in his car, reverses, and gets the heck out of there. When he gets home, he realizes that the footprints weren't just on the hood of the car. They went all the way up his windshield, on top of his sunroof, and towards the back of the car, but they just stopped before they got to the trunk. I also forgot to mention that he did this on a school night. So when he got to school the next day, he showed me his car with the footprints on it. And with the sun hitting it, you could see clear as day footprints walking up his windshield. And in all honesty, that is a huge factor on why and how I have not visited that place. I'm too scared. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
We were sat talking about people going missing last night when we were having food, and my friend suddenly said, oh my god, where I grew up in the 90s there was this really, really eerie missing persons case. So obviously I was like, oh my god, tell me everything. So this all happened in Coventry in 1991 in December. So it was really like creepy, foggy, cold anyway. And this girl called Nicola Payne was only 18 and she was a brand new mum. I think her baby Owen was only about 7 months at this point. Now, even though Nicola was only young herself, she was an amazing mum. She just took to motherhood like a duck to water. She was so amazing as a new mum. And on the 14th of December that year, she left her boyfriend Jason's house, where I think she was living also at the time with the new baby, to go to her parents' house, which should have been a very, very short walk. I believe it was less than half a mile. It should have only taken her roughly about 6 minutes. She cut through this area called the Black Pad, which sounds creepy to me anyway, but this was basically like a shortcut through so she could get quicker from her boyfriend's house to her parents' house. And this was kind of like back in the day before mobile phones were popular. You tended not to really have a mobile phone, or if you did, it was just like a black Nokia brick. Nicola didn't have any way of like communicating, and she shouldn't really have needed to. She was only walking for about 5 minutes. And the alarm was raised pretty quickly when she just didn't get back to her parents' house, and nobody knew where she was. Now, police were informed, and obviously, like I said, they couldn't trace her phone or anything. They basically had to get helicopters in the air to try and scour the area for any sign of her. A dog walker called Patrick did come forward with a really creepy story. He said he'd heard a woman scream that day. He'd also seen a random man lurking around at that Black Pad area, and he saw a blue car, I think it was called a blue Ford Capri car, nearby too, and he presumed that must have been that man's car. And another call came in to police, another call reporting a woman screaming from that rough area. So police officers kind of went door to door just asking if anybody had heard anything, anybody had seen anything. And another local said, I actually saw 2 random men kind of lurking around the Black Pad area, but obviously didn't think anything of it at the time. And I don't know exactly how, maybe from people's descriptions of these men, but 2 men were actually taken in for questioning. These were Nigel Barwell and his brother-in-law Thomas O'Reilly. They were questioned by police, but I feel like police didn't really have much to go on, so they did have to release them at this point. Then a really creepy part of this case is the fact that the family of the missing woman started receiving eerie, like, anonymous phone calls. A voice at the other end was saying that they knew something about Nicola's disappearance, but they couldn't ever work out who was making these phone calls, and police could never identify the person. And honestly, this mystery rumbled on for ages, even years, until finally police had what they thought was a little bit of a breakthrough in this case. They got a tip that Nicola could have been buried in a local person's back garden. I don't know what this tip sort of was relating to, who made it, but regardless, the police took it pretty seriously and they did dig up a full back garden. Sadly though, they had no luck with this. There was no belongings of Nicola's and no sign of Nicola at all. Then in 2007, a 37-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of abducting and murdering Nicola. Now, I don't know what evidence there was, but there must have been something. They don't just arrest people for no reason. However, frustratingly, this man got released. There was no charges brought. Now, then in 2013, new forensic tests did lead to 3 arrests. One arrest was of a woman for perverting the course of justice, and the 2 others were the people from earlier on, Nigel Barwell and Thomas O'Reilly. Now, although the woman ended up being released, Nigel and Thomas were brought to trial. Their main evidence against them was some forensics linking them to a tent on the Black Pad, which also had Nicola's hair found in it, and also some witnesses who said that Nigel and Thomas had actually confessed to the killing to them. But to the frustration of Nicola's family, the pair were found not guilty. Sadly, Nicola's mum, Marilyn, actually passed away in 2023, never knowing what happened to her daughter. We still don't know what truly happened to Nicola Payne.
Imagine you had a friend who could control duendes. Would you be scared? Would you continue to be their friend? Or would you ask them to have the duendes do something for you? What would I have the duendes do for me though? No, I don't want to fuck with that. So this girl has a friend, and one day they're hanging out, and out of nowhere her friend was like, oh, I have some kiddos. And she was like, kiddos? like, what do you mean? Because she knew her friend did not have children. She didn't understand her very well, but when she's like, what do you mean you have kiddos? This girl brings out a little figurine. She said it looked like a little old man in a hood and just like colored clothing. She thought it was really weird, and that's when her friend was like, they're duendes. She explains that the figurines were just almost like their home where they come back into, and that if she brought these little figurines with her, the duendes could go anywhere with her as well. Her friend then tells her that this is the way that she could travel with the duendes. For example, she goes hiking, she goes into a forest, and by her bringing the figurines, she allows the duendes to also go into this forest, go into a hike with her. Her friend also tells her that anytime she goes out, she has to bring the duendes with her because she says the duendes get mad if she leaves them at home. She listens to her friend and she doesn't really judge her because she's like, well, everybody has their beliefs, you know, everybody does whatever they want, whatever. So time goes on, and you know, she still sees her friend. They always have conversations about the duendes, and her friend continues to tell her, well, the duendes are very like pranksters. Sometimes they take items from your home. So when she hears that, she's like, wait, I recently lost a ring and this ring is very precious to me. And she tells her friend, well, I don't know if maybe you or maybe your duendes could tell me where this ring is at, because by this point she had been looking for that ring for a minute. And her friend is like, well, would you give me permission to come over to your house so that I can see if maybe, you know, there's something there? When her friend comes over to her house, like steps into the door, the threshold, she tells her, you know what? Back there, you have 4 duendes. And at this point, she's a little bit scared because she's like, what do you mean? And her friend is like, I can see them, I could feel them, I could sense them. So she's like, can I go back there and check? And she lets her go back there. And she hears where her friend is like, kiddos, are you guys back there? And she almost like she was talking to children. When she returns, she was like, yeah, there's 4 duendes back there and they're with your small dog. And she explains that she starts to think about her dog. She's like, oh my gosh, like some nights I hear my dog crying, and in my head I'm just thinking, oh, she wants to go out and play, but I'm not gonna let her out. Her friend tells her that the duendes are the ones that are messing with her little dog. Her friend then asks her, do you want the duendes to stay here with you? And she was like, fuck, I'm scared right now. Like, what do you mean for them to stay here? She's like, well, I can take them with me if you want. And she's like, yes, take the duendes with you. Take them with you. Like, please, go ahead. And when she said that, she explains that her friend was like, kiddos, can you come over here? She's not prepared to take care of you. So if you come with me, I can love you. I'll take care of you guys. You'll have a good life with me. I don't want you to get mad at her. It's not that she wants to kick you out, but she's not prepared on how to take care of you. Bitch, take them. Now here's the really fucking weird part, okay? She said that this entire time her husband was also there with her, listening to her friend talking to like nothing, because they're not seeing anything. But the fact that she knew that something had been messing with her dog, you know, they were both a little bit shocked. However, the moment that the lady's like, okay, come on, get into my purse, to the duendes, because she's about to take them home, she says that her and her husband hear 4 sounds really close to that purse. Like almost if you have grabbed a little rock and just put it into a purse, they heard that sound 4 times. Her husband's looking at her like, did you just hear that? Like, they're both looking at each other like, what the fuck? Like, we just heard, she said, duendes, get into the bag. They heard 4 little sounds into that bag. Obviously scared, obviously what the fuck, right? However, she's like, whoa, wait, what about my ring? She's like, this is why you guys are here. Where's my ring? And the friend's like, oh my gosh, yes, I completely forgot. Okay, she opens her bag. She's talking into the bag because again, the duendes are in there, and she tells them, okay guys, you have 5 minutes. You need to return the ring to her. You only have 5 minutes, so you better go and get that ring. Apparently duendes are out there getting the ring, right? 5 minutes pass. The friend is like, okay guys, you have to come back again. They hear those 4 sounds into that purse. She says that her friend leaves, and her and her husband like, what the F just happened? Like, they were shocked. They were like, well, I don't see the ring anywhere, so whatever. If this is even real, like, I guess at least she took the duendes with her. The following morning, she says that she's always the first one to wake up, and she was about to go downstairs to make a coffee. When she gets to the last step, she sees that ring that had been missing. This couldn't have happened this easily, because when she did lose that ring, she said the ring, I think, was given to her by her grandmother, so that ring meant a lot. She didn't want to lose that ring and not not find it. So when it was lost, her and her mom, they had moved like the refrigerator, they moved sofas. They really wanted to find this ring and it was never anywhere. So the fact that the following day she sees it in that front step was insane. She immediately grabs her phone, takes a picture of the ring on that step and sends it to the friend, the one who like took her for duendes, and her friend responded like, I told you they had taken your ring. She starts explaining that for a very long time she always thought that duendes were bad beings, that she was always very terrified on the topic, but after this happened to her, because this is the very first thing that had ever happened to her that had to do with duendes, she also realized that they are also for good, like they can do some good things as well. Which is crazy because I feel like we've all heard stories of them taking like keys and like random things, and there's some people who have just very respectfully asked them to bring them back, and then the following day or like in a few days they end up finding whatever had been lost. But what do you guys think? Would you ask your friend if she can control duendes to find something for you, or would you just like not want to mess with this at all? Can someone stand behind me and hold my earlobes like this? Because look at how cute these are. I have a fat ass earlobe and look at it. It does whatever it wants. Who says only grandma has these candies? They're so cute, right? Have you ever heard of somebody confronting La Llorona several times? Or what about if you have confronted La Llorona and you were a kid and didn't even realize it? Nah, bitch, that sounds like something I would remember. So Julio as a kid loved spending time with his grandmother at her home all the time. The days that he spent at his grandmother's home were filled with adventures. Grandma never gave him like restrictions regarding the TV or games or anything like that. And no, it wasn't because grandma was irresponsible. It was just that every time they would sit down during the day to watch TV or for him to play a game, she would just accidentally fall asleep. He enjoyed spending time with his grandmother though, because she would always be up for whatever he wanted to do. If they wanted to go to the garden, or if they wanted to go and play, or if they wanted to go inside to watch TV, the grandmother was always there right by his side. He says that his fondest memories with her would be at nighttime too, because she would either sing to him or read him stories just so he could fall asleep. So here's the thing, as a kid he never saw like what his grandma did as weird. It was only until he grew as an adult and started getting into the paranormal where he started thinking about those memories and saying, wait, that was a little bit strange. Why wouldn't she go to sleep at night but she would go to sleep during the day? There was also other things that she would do that now as an adult he was like, wait, why would she do that? Every night that he would spend with his grandmother where she would be putting him to bed, he would always hear really strange sounds, almost like if somebody was crying very far away. And any time that he would ask his grandmother like, hey, what's that sound? It sounds weird, she would literally get on the bed with him, hug him, sing to him, close all the windows and try to put him to bed, telling him it's nothing, it's the cats, it's the dogs outside, don't worry about it. He says that she would go as far as to close and lock that bedroom door, and she would start singing to him really loud. She would also be like, just go to sleep already. He'd be like, but grandma, it sounds like somebody's crying outside. And she's like, it's a cat, it's just a cat, don't worry about it. Some nights he'd be like, it's not the cats or the dogs, you can hear the dogs barking at whatever's crying out there. She'd be like, no, it's just the animals out there, you don't worry about it and go to sleep. Regardless of what happened or what he heard in his grandmother's home, every time he would fall asleep, she would do the same thing. She would get the blanket, put it all the way up to his neck, and then she would pull one of his arms out and make him like pray and bless himself before going to bed. Then she would do the same to him and the bed that he would sleep on, saying the following: Bendice esta cama de campo a campo, que no se le arrime ni cosa mala ni cosa de espanto. Good luck translating that, Letty. Bless this bed from here to there. Don't let anything negative come or anything spooky, which does not rhyme in English, okay? Let me live, I'm trying, but that's essentially what she said. You're welcome. That is the prayer that the grandmother would always do when he would spend the night, no matter what happened, getting ready for him to go to bed. And to be honest, he explains that those moments with his grandmother were moments so like precious. He loved them. He never saw them as anything negative. He enjoyed anytime she would pray over him or force him to pray, because obviously now as an adult, that's something that stayed with him and he always does before bed. So now he's an adult and he's remembering all those times and he's realizing something, and it kind of does scare him a little bit. Grandma was always too awake at night but very tired during the day. He also remembers something that he would have never even noticed as a kid, and it was that his grandmother always seemed really scared at nighttime. He would always believe her when she would say nothing is out there. However, now as an adult, he would remember that any time that she would pray over him, her hand was always shaky. Like, her hand was never shaky during the day, she never seemed that way, so why was she so scared at nighttime? He kept thinking about all these like weird things, and he decided that he couldn't just stay with that curiosity. He was going to go to his parents' house and ask them, like, was there something wrong with grandmother? What was going on? There was definitely something odd about the nighttime ritual. Unfortunately, the grandmother is already passed, so he can't go and ask her anything. So he went over to his parents' house and he asked them. Was there anything weird about grandmother's house? Like, is there anything strange about it? And very casually, the dad was like, oh yeah, the day after she passed away, we sold that house immediately. And he was like, well, why? Why were you in such a rush to sell that house? And the father was like, well, because La Llorona was always around that house. Your grandmother just didn't want to sell that house because it was a gift from your grandfather. Every time you would beg us to go over to grandmother's house, she would beg us to come and get you when the nighttime came because she said it was too dangerous, but you didn't want to leave her. You wanted to stay the nights with her. The grandmother went as far as to tell him, hey, you're putting him at risk. I don't want anything to happen to him. But he loved his grandmother so much, he always wanted to stay there. The grandmother would tell his parents that he would hear La Llorona, but that she would lie to him and be like, it's the dogs, it's the cat. It's nothing for you to worry about. Just go to sleep. They even told him that she would close the window to the bedroom where he would sleep because every time she would go to the window to like look outside, she was always outside in that patio where the window was. And when she would be looking, she would start walking closer and closer to the window. And then the parents were like, you don't remember? Every time you would come back from grandmother's house, you would be like, Mom, Dad, every night people will be knocking on the window at grandma's house. In the moment where his parents are telling him, he's like, oh my God, I do remember that. And then he like felt his stomach drop because he's like, that happened like more than a couple of times. And he had no idea that the entire time he was in the presence of La Llorona. Only he didn't remember. He just thought that they were cats and dogs because his precious grandmother just didn't want her grandson to be in danger or to be afraid. The fact that his grandmother like never let him be afraid or even told him anything. She was afraid herself, but she still protected him. Like, bitch, don't cry, what the fuck? Anyway, what do you guys think? La Llorona should have been afraid of the grandmother, that's for sure.
Follow me here, okay? Girl next door turned into the nation's sweetheart, an idol, pretty much a celebrity, who was also a TV news reporter who reported on true crime. But not in a million years would anyone have thought that her death would be the one reported on next. Today's story starts off in southwest England, where Jill Wendy Dando was born. She was the baby of the family. She had an older brother. And from her early years in life, Jill showed how strong of a girl she was. At 3 years old, she had to undergo an extensive heart surgery to fix a hole in her heart. And luckily they did fix it, but it ended up being a life-saving surgery for baby Jill. Jill, as a young girl, was very bright. She was intellectual, she was quick-witted, and she was also kind, friendly, a very approachable, likable person. And that stayed her personality throughout her entire life. She was just the kind of person that was so easy to like. Jill Dando got her first job working as a reporter for the local weekly newspaper where both her father and her brother worked. This would be her first job as a reporter, but it would show throughout the progression of her career that Jill just had it. She just had the thing it takes to be successful in that career field. She had a confident delivery, she had charisma, but while at the same time being a very relatable person, she had all the things she needed to have in order to engage an audience, and she did it well. When Jill first got that job, she walked into an office filled with men and boys, and she said, what you can do, I can do better. Not in an arrogant way though, she just backed herself and she knew her potential. 5 years later, she moved away from her hometown at 23 years old and started working at BBC. It's at BBC where she would eventually make the transition from radio to TV. And this was huge because remember, this was in the 90s, so it wasn't yet normal or typical for everyone and their mother to have a TV in their house. TV and TV channels were still up and coming, so it was a very exciting point of her life. By May of 1998, Jill was in her late 20s when she got the massive opportunity to move from from regional to national television in London to report television news still with BBC, and in the years following that, she was on programs such as The Breakfast News, The Morning News, 6 O'Clock News, a travel program called Holiday, which was incredibly popular, and the very well-known crime series Crime Watch. Jill Dando was reporting on Crime Watch from 1995 all the way up to the day her life was brutally ripped away from her, and we'll loop back around to this. But long story short, Jill Dando was a big deal. Everyone knew her name, everyone knew her face. Granted that the odds of her face being on your TV at different times throughout the day were pretty high, and her image only scaled higher when she had a bit of a rebrand. Not that she needed it, but she got the Princess Diana haircut as she started styling in similar ways as Princess Diana, and the two of them had so much in common. They honestly look really similar, and they were very often compared to each other. Princess Diana was the people's princess, and Jill Dando was the nation's sweetheart. She loved her job, she was amazing at it, and she quickly became the face of UK television pretty much. During her time at BBC, Jill Dando got into a romantic relationship with BBC executive Bob Wheaton. Their relationship was kept hush mode for a little bit. They kept it a secret because, well, he was way higher up in BBC, and there was definitely probably some power imbalance there. But they ended up dating for around 7 years. They went their separate ways in 1996, and it was, from what we know, an amicable breakup. In December of 1997, when Jill was 35 years old, her career still very much blossoming and blooming, she met a doctor, a man called Alan Farthing, and let's call it what it was, love at first sight. They fell in love, they got engaged, they started planning their dream wedding, but tragically, Jill Dando would not get to see the day of her wedding, and all of her hopes and dreams would be cut way too soon. April 26th of 1999, it was a Monday. Jill Dando at this time still had her house, but she had pretty much been living at her fiance's house with him. She didn't spend much time at her own house, but that day she had to stop by at her house to pick up something that was faxed to her. She parked her car, stepped out, and started making her way to her front door. But before she could even make it a step inside her house, she was approached by someone who took a weapon, pressed it to the back of her head, and fired. Minutes later, her neighbor who was out on a walk saw Jill lying in a pool of her own blood. She immediately called 911 and broke the news on that call to the operator that the victim looked to be Jill Dando. Emergency services arrived as fast as they could. They rushed Jill to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, 37-year-old Jill was pronounced deceased by 1:07 p.m. Her cause of death ruled as a single wound to the head. They determined the weapon had to be pressed right up to her head because of how severe the injury was. Later that day, the news broke, and it was her co-workers, her friends, the people that she had spent years working side by side. It was them who had to report the news of her death. And it was a shock to the nation, a devastating shock that I'm sure you could feel in the air. The aftermath of this happening was chaotic, as I'm sure you can imagine. Police were all up and down that street attempting to begin their investigation. Media coverage was insanity, and it baffles me. I know it's their job to literally take pictures and cover the media, but the disrespect to try and step over people at a crime scene just to try and get the best picture, it's a little bit disgusting. Regardless, this was breaking news. Speculation about a motive quickly began spreading by the public, and law enforcement had to start trying to find the person who did this. Granted, this was done in broad daylight on her own doorstep in the middle of the day in public, yet they were close to 0 witnesses. Maybe one witness. Her next door neighbor said that on or around the time they believed that Jill was attacked, he heard a scream, but he was unsure of what it was or who it came from. Nevertheless, witness statements were not going to be much help in this investigation, but what could be of help turned out to be CCTV footage. Authorities decided the first thing to do was retrace Jill's steps the morning of, to try and figure out how her day started, where she was, who she spoke to see if there was any sign of anything going wrong. After looking at over 400 hours of CCTV footage, they put together that morning Jill left her fiance's house, drove to a gas station, got gas, stopped at a couple stores to buy things she needed, and then she made her way to her house, which is where she parked the car, got out, and was murdered. The next question investigators had was, who knew Jill's day-to-day schedule? More specifically, who was aware that Jill would be stopping at her house that day? Somebody had to know because they were there before Jill even got the chance to open her doors. So who would have known? Well, the answer to that question is her agent, a man called John. John was the one and only person who knew that Jill was going to be stopping at her house to pick up something from her fax machine because he was the one who faxed it to her and told her to go pick it up. So John was questioned, but then he was ruled out. Then police had to do what was kind of process of elimination. They looked into Jill's close friends and family and spoke to them to see if any of them stood out. And that is including her ex-boyfriend, Mr. Bob Wheaton, because come to find out, he owed her a lot of money, so maybe that could have been a motive. But eventually he was ruled out as a suspect, and nobody else questioned stood out either, so no luck there. Next was the idea that a professional hired could have done this. And with this theory, there seems to be two different opinions. On one side of things, some people believe that there is no way that this could have been a professional because it was in broad daylight. It was done by somewhere where it could have been seen and they could have been caught. It was too risky. It was a sloppy job. On the other hand, though, that's why some people believe that it could have been a professional because it was done in broad daylight and nobody saw it, because maybe the person that did it was so experienced and knew exactly what they were doing and how they were doing it that they were able to execute it perfectly without anyone seeing them. And a potential theory that arose to support the idea that this was done by a hired professional had to do with what was going on in the world at that time. Now, quick disclaimer, I am very uneducated when it comes to speaking on history, wars, politics, anything of the sort. I should not be the person who you look at if you're trying to learn and inform yourself about that sort of stuff, because I'm trying to educate myself, but that is just not in my wheelhouse. However, I will try to explain this in a way that makes sense. Stay with me. In the year that Jill Dando was murdered, NATO, which included the UK where Jill was from, was involved in the Kosovo War. They were fighting against Serbia. 3 weeks before Jill's life was taken, she was on TV appealing for aid for the Kosovar, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kosovar Albanian refugees. So she was fighting to spread awareness for refugees and victims of the war. And again, she was from the UK, which was part of NATO, which was in war against Serbian forces. Following her death, a number of threatening calls were made to the BBC claiming that they were messages from Serbia and claiming that they would end the life of British journalists who were women to make a statement and send a message. People believe that their motive for these actions or these threats was revenge from Serbian extremists who could have been angry at British media coverage, cough cough, Jill Dando, and or NATO's attack on Serbia, which had just started a few weeks before her death. In simpler terms, people started to speculate and wonder, could her death be an act of violence from Serbia wanting to make a statement or send a message to the UK? Does that make sense? Anyway, in the end, the lead investigator on the case ruled out the possibility of a Serbian connection, so that was also scratched. Is it starting to sound like every lead is a dead end and they are having zero luck with making any progress at all in this case? Yeah, I bet it is. That's what it felt like to the British public as well. A year went by with no movement on the case, and let's not forget who we're talking about, Jill Dando, the nation's sweetheart. For there to be no suspects named, no persons of interest named, no arrest made, was crazy after a whole year. And it was pretty frustrating and I bet pretty scary to the public. The person who did this was just out and about and no one knew who it was. Police finally are like, let's start from the beginning. Let's look through the people and names from a year ago and see if we missed something. In comes a man named Barry George into the picture. Barry George was a name police had heard before a year ago, back when the crime took place. He was a local man and he was suspicious for a few different reasons. Let's talk about some of them. Day after Jill's death, authorities got 3 separate calls reporting that Barry was in the area at that time, reportedly acting very weird, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but think about it. 3 different people thought that he was acting weird enough that they felt the need to call the police and report it, so he must have been acting pretty off. He called a taxi company to ask them to tell him what time they saw him there and what he was wearing, as if he was trying to make sure that he had an alibi. He was kind of making sure that he had his story straight. For what? We don't know. He had a criminal record for SA and he had a weird, concerning obsession with Princess Diana, who looked exactly like Jill Dando. So police decided that, yeah, it might be worthwhile to dig deeper on this guy a year later. They got a search warrant for his house. In his house, they find a coat. In the coat pocket, they find a single particle of residue. That particle of residue matched the residue that was found at the scene of the crime. Because of that, on May 25th of 2000, Barry George was arrested and charged with the murder of Jill Dando. The following year, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But get this, his conviction was overturned, claiming that the evidence they had against him was circumstantial and deemed as unreliable. So it was overturned by the Court of Appeal in 2007, and following a retrial, George was acquitted and released in 2008 after spending 8 years in prison. He didn't do it. As of today, Jill Dando's murder remains unsolved. There are theories, conspiracies, but no definitive answer has been found. People have speculated that maybe it was an ex-boyfriend of Jill's, a secret boyfriend. There's still a big belief that Jill made the wrong person mad, the wrong criminal mad, while reporting on Crime Watch, and maybe got a little too close to finding something out, or just rubbed the wrong person the wrong way, and her life was ended as a result to get revenge. There's also the possibility that it was a sick, crazy fan that has been spoken about. There's a chance that this is a case of mistaken identity, or there is also the possibility that she was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Regardless, all of the above is just speculation because we don't know. If I'm being completely honest, it does keep me up at night that we don't know, because it just makes me feel so like icky knowing that people have ended the lives of other people and have never been caught, and they're just like out about going grocery shopping and like going to the movie theater probably, or Probably not, actually. They're probably doing weird things. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this case, and thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Jill's case. I love you all very, very much. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the foreheads, every single one of you.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Do you want to know what this man said? Because I'm going to tell you and you're going to be like, how could he be so stupid? Quick intro. Are you guys mad at me? Don't be mad at me. I'm so sorry. I haven't posted in so long. It's actually been horrible. Like every single day I think about you guys. I want to talk to you guys. I drank a lot of coffee today. Okay, let me chill. I took a few days off. I was traveling and I put so much effort into these stories that I can't just like whip up a video last minute. So I'm sorry about that. Will not happen ever again. But there's no time to waste. Let's get straight into today's story. Also, episode 2 of the podcast out today. That's probably going to be up a little bit later. So go watch that later. Like if you want to. If you don't, that's fine too. I do need to give a warning for this video. This video does involve the death of a young child. So if you think that that is triggering to you in any way, shape, or form, or you think it's going to negatively affect your mental health, please skip this video. Skip this video and I will see you in my next one. Your mental health has always been and will always be #1 priority. So yeah, take care of yourselves. Love you. Richard Allen Davis was born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. He was the middle child. He had 2 older siblings and 2 younger siblings, and he grew up in a deeply dysfunctional and violent home. His parents, both of them, were just horrendous people. They were horrible to each other, and the kids grew up seeing that. Their family was very unstable. They moved around all the time as well, which only made things harder, and the parents were both very neglectful to all the children. And on top of that, there was frequent physical mistreatment shown more oftentimes than not to the children. Richard's mother would use violence to discipline her children. But the thing is, it doesn't even sound like she was trying to teach them a lesson, to teach them right for wrong. It was just more so her punishing them when they got in trouble and doing things to them on purpose to harm them and to inflict pain on them. When Richard was 10 years old, his parents separated and all of the kids chose to stay with the father. From that moment on, the mother, which probably was a good thing, basically walked out of their life. She never cared or made any kind of efforts to see them ever again. And throughout the next few years, Richard's life remained awful. The dad brought a lot of harm to the children as well. At one point, the dad broke Richard's jaw from how bad he was hurting him. All that to say, all that Richard knew from the day that he was born was violence, and that would be something that Richard carried with him for the rest of his life. When he was so young in middle school and his early high school years, Richard Davis was in and out of juvenile detention centers and psychiatric institutions. He was showing serious behavioral issues that he had had his entire life. He was not a very well-liked person because there was something so alarming about him. And his first act of displaying aggression and or violent behavior was when he would start walking around the neighborhood that he lived in, weapon in hand, kitchen sharp weapon in hand, looking for people's pets, dogs, or cats to make his victims. I do not want to go into detail on that, but you know what I mean. At 15 to 16 years old, he started breaking into people's houses. At 17 years old, he got caught for theft, first stealing a motorcycle, and after that, he joined the army, but only for 13 months. After that, he was honorably discharged. This word. Honorably discharged? By 1973, he was 19 years old. He had no job, no direction, and no remorse. And he decided that what he was going to do with his free time would be to go on a crime spree. He would break into people's houses and commit burglary. He did this over and over again, close to 20 times before he was caught. And then he was convicted and sent to prison. But that was honestly just the beginning of a pattern that he would repeat for the next 2 decades. Crime, prison, parole, repeat. Because when Richard would get in trouble for something and he would be behind bars, he would never learn anything except how to get better at not getting caught. He committed burglary again, he was caught again, went to jail again, and was released again. Do you see what I mean about a pattern? Then in 1976, when he was 22 years old, his crimes escalated. He decided that stealing just wasn't enough for him anymore. He wanted to take it a step further. He was looking for the adrenaline that he liked. He was kind of bored of just stealing houses. He wanted more because he liked the rush that he got when he did things that he knew were wrong. And at 22 years old, he decided to kidnap a woman, weapon in hand, a 26-year-old girl he saw at a parking lot. He snuck up to her, forced her into his car, and threatened to end her life. The woman was thankfully able to open the car door and escape. She flagged down a car to help her, which with her luck ended up being a police officer, and with his help, Richard Allen Davis was caught and once again arrested, sentenced, and sent to prison. When in custody, Richard faked unaliving himself, and it was ruled that he would be transported from a jail to a psychiatric hospital, and when he was being transported, he managed to escape some way, somehow, and just like that, he was out on the streets yet again. And what did he do? Well, he broke into another house with a woman woman inside and he threatened the woman, hurt her physically in more than one way, and then he ran away. He then broke into an animal shelter, stole some money. He then attacked another girl at a parking lot with a weapon. She luckily was also able to escape. Then he broke into the house of another woman, left the house, and hid in the bushes. By the way, all this happened in less than a week, I think 5 days to be exact. But anyways, when he was inside the house, that woman's house, and then he went outside, hid in the bushes, he was watching this girl like a peeping Tom, but because he had broken into her house, this girl could tell that something was weird and she was scared and she called the police, and the police went over there and they found Richard hiding in the bushes. Like, what a scary, disgusting man. Also embarrassing. How old are you? You're hiding in the bushes? Like, do you not have something else to do for fun? I don't understand. Anyway, he was finally rearrested and taken back to jail. He returned to jail not only to finish off his original sentence, but now he's handed more sentences for everything that he did in his little 5-day crime spree. So by this point, he's racked up a string of convictions: burglary, robbery, kidnapping, but somehow he just keeps getting out. And that's exactly what happened 6 years after. At 28 years old, he was released again, and to no surprise, he goes right back to doing the only thing that he knows how to do: committing crime. But this time around, he decides that he needs a little partner in crime, so he finds himself a little girlfriend, and she becomes his partner in crime. Together, they do everything that Richard has already done, but now they do it together. Across multiple state lines, they rob banks, they rob stores, they break into houses, they rob people, they do substances, they go out, they cause chaos, they threaten people. They are just complete and utter menaces together, violent, dangerous criminals, and they do this for 6 months until they get pulled over for a traffic violation. They get arrested and charged. For their 6-month crime spree, Richard was sentenced to 16 years and his little girlfriend partner in crime received a 6-month sentence. Are you overwhelmed yet? Because I am. I know this is a lot, but stay with me. By July of 1993, Richard Allen Davis was a clear and obvious criminal. He had served time in at least 8 different prisons and violated parole more than once. Psychologists who saw him, met with him, talked to him, described him to be manipulative, hostile, dangerous, and beyond reform, meaning they didn't know what to do to help him, or I hate to say fix him, but you know what I mean. He was 39 years old at this time. He had only served 8 out of his 16-year sentence, but guess what? Do I even need to say it? He was released. He was released in July, and only 3 months later, he would commit his worst crime yet. 12-year-old little Polly Klaas lived in Petaluma, California. She was born January 3rd, 1981, and she lived in that quiet little town just north of San Francisco. She loved acting. She loved dressing up in costumes and performing plays in her living room. She was the cutest little girl, and she was like an inspiring actress from the moment that she was like 3 years old. She loved to act. She had long brown hair, the prettiest eyes, and the kindness that radiated through everyone around her. Her friends described her as the kind of girl who made everyone feel included. Her teachers thought that she was funny and creative, and her parents both referred to her as their little ray of sunshine. She lived with her mother Eve and her little sister. Her parents were divorced, but they had a very, very healthy co-parenting relationship. October 1st of 1993 was the day that everything changed for Polly Klaas. It was a Friday night, and she had 2 of her friends over for a slumber party at her mother's house, and the girls did what 12-year-old little girls do. They laughed, they played, they tried on Halloween costumes, they braided each other's hair, and around 10:30 p.m., Polly's mom went to bed. The little girls were still up playing, but just as the night was winding down, a strange and gross man crept into the house through a window carrying a sharp weapon with him. When Polly opened the door of her bedroom to walk out and go grab sleeping bags for her and her friends, she saw Richard Allen Davis standing just outside of her bedroom. This was Polly's biggest fear. She was a 12-year-old little girl who firstly was scared of the dark, but secondly was terrified of the boogeyman. She was always scared. It was always her biggest fear that the boogeyman would sneak into her house and kidnap her. And that night, her biggest fear was standing right before her eyes. Richard walked into Polly's room with his weapon, and he ordered the girls to be quiet. And keep in mind, these are 3 children that we're talking about. They were so scared of what was happening, they probably didn't even understand what was happening. Richard ordered Polly's 2 friends to lie on the ground and not look up at him. He tied them up with strips of cloth, placed pillowcases over their heads, and whispered that he was only there to rob the place and he wasn't going to hurt them. Then he turned to Polly, and just like that, she was gone. No one screamed, no one ran. They were too scared. By the time that the girls did scream for help, by the time that they went to go wake up Polly's mother, Polly Klaas had vanished. Richard forced her into his car and he drove off with her. Minutes later, after realizing that Polly was gone, Polly's mom, Eve, called 911 and police arrived quickly. And the news of this traveled quickly. Petaluma was a quiet small town. Things like this did not happen in their town. Kids were not kidnapped from their house. Polly's friends, still very much in shock, were able to give police a description of the man who had broken in. A white male, stringy hair, smelled like had a weapon, calm and calculated. Amber Alerts did not exist back then, but what followed was one of the biggest large child abduction searches in US history. Flyers with Polly's photos were plastered across California. Pictures of flyers of her were all over telephone poles, store windows, and TV screens. Celebrities also helped spread the story. The air in Petaluma felt thick. It felt eerie. In the days following Polly's disappearance, parents started locking their doors, locking their windows. Sleepovers were canceled. Children were scared. Over 4,000 volunteers helped in the search. They walked fields, checked bodies of water, handed out flyers, and lit candles. FBI agents joined the search. Helicopters circled above. A hotline was used for the public to call in with any leads or any tips, and for the next 60 days, law enforcement did everything they could to find this little girl, but it seemed that the man who had taken Polly had disappeared without a trace. But what no one knew then was that only 1 hour after Polly was taken, the man who took her crossed paths with law enforcement and slipped right through their fingers. Just 1 hour after the kidnapping, Richard Allen Davis was spotted by a babysitter and her employer near rural property in Sonoma County, around 40 miles away from where Polly lived. He was trespassing, he was acting strange, and he was covered in scratches. Police were called, they showed up, they spoke to Richard, they spoke to the owner of the house whose property he was on, asked the owner if they wanted to press charges, and the owner said, "I don't want to press charges, just please get him off of my property." So the police talked to Richard, they ran his ID, they helped him get his car out of a ditch that it was stuck in, and they let him go. They didn't see Polly, they didn't know that this guy had just kidnapped a little girl 1 hour prior, they didn't know and somehow didn't find out after running his ID that Richard Allen Davis was a career criminal. That night he walked away and the officers did not connect him to Polly's disappearance. The search continued and spread quickly throughout the next 60 days, and on November 28th, 2 months after Polly Klaas disappeared, police received another 911 call. The property owner in Sonoma County, where Richard had been that night when he got his car stuck in a ditch, was cleaning something outside when she found something disturbing. Items belonging to a child, including torn ballet tights, a red sweatshirt, and a pair of red tights that matched what Polly had been wearing the night that she disappeared. She called police immediately and they came out to search the area. This was huge because they now realized for the first time that the night this man was found on this person's property was the same night that this 12-year-old little girl was taken from her house. And remember, they scanned his IDs, they had spoken to him, so they knew exactly who they were looking for. They knew exactly who their guy was. They found him, they arrested him, and they took him in for questioning. Polly's two friends were also able to confirm that that was the guy that they saw in Polly's bedroom that night. When officers arrested Richard, he didn't panic, he didn't try to run, he acted like a man who had played the system before and thought he still could. He honestly had a really weird and gross confidence about him. They sit him down and they ask him what he had been doing the night of October 1st, 1993, the night Polly Klaas disappeared from her bedroom. And do you want to know what this man said? First of all, he said the reason why he was in town that night to begin with was because he was visiting his mother. He said that that day he was at a park and said he started to feel a little bit out of it, a little bit groggy. And then he said that what he did next was a blur. He didn't really know how or why he got to Polly's house. He couldn't say what he did. He said he didn't remember. He said that one moment he was at the park and the next he was in his car with this little girl and he was confused. Poor guy. Give me a break, dude. He said he crashed his car in a ditch. He was standing on that person's property and said that he took Polly out of his car, hid her in the bushes, then ran into the police, talked to the police. And when the police left, Richard went back to the bushes to find Polly and decided right then and there that this had gone too far. Polly had seen his face. She would be able to recognize him. And to avoid getting caught, he made the decision that he needed to get rid of her. He needed to end her life. So he drove her north to a wooded area. She was crying and begging. And then Richard, using a piece of cloth, tightened it around her neck until she was gone. He ended her life. He dumped her body by a bush, covered it with branches and leaves, and then he left. He left her there for 60 days. Richard led authorities to the exact spot where Polly's body was. She was still wearing the same red tights that she had been wearing at her sleepover. Her body by this point had been severely decomposing and had been outside in the woods for 60 days for so long that they couldn't even test for her cause of death. Richard was charged with the death of Polly Klaas, and his trial began in 1996, nearly 3 years after Polly had been kidnapped. And Richard was facing charges for first-degree kidnapping, burglary, and attempted. The prosecution painted him as a cold, calculated monster who to silence a child and had a violent history that made his crime predictable. His defense spoke about his childhood trauma and tried to say that he was a damaged person and that's why he did what he did. Wrong. People have trauma and they don't other people. The jury found Richard guilty on all charges, and after the fact, Richard was given a chance to speak. He stood up, and with the cameras rolling in the courtroom, he made an obscene gesture. He put both of his middle fingers up in the air and delivered a vile and false claim. He said that Polly had told him that her father had SA'd her. He said that to her father in the courtroom. It was his final act of cruelty. He's disgusting. The judge, the jury, Polly's family were disgusted with his behavior. You could hear them gasping in the courtroom. The judge looked at Richard and said, quote, "Mr. Davis, this is not the time for you to spew garbage. Sit down," end quote. In 1996, Richard Allen Davis was sentenced to death. Today, he is 70 years old and he still is on death row. After the trial and after the sentencing, Polly's family faced the painful reality that even though justice was served, nothing could ever or would ever bring Polly back. Her father, Mark, channeled his grief into advocacy, founding the Class Kids Foundation to help protect children and support families of missing children. Polly's memory lives on through his work and in the hearts of those who followed her story. Her legacy became a symbol of change, prompting stronger laws around child abduction and inspiring a national conversation about child safety. Her family remembers her as a vibrant, loving girl who continues to be loved and missed every single day and will for the rest of their lives. That is all I have for today's story. It's heartbreaking. This is the most disgusting man that I've ever met, and I never want to speak about him again. But thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Polly's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.